At 4ZZZ, we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we broadcast. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging of the Turrbal and Jagera people. We acknowledge that their sovereignty over this land was never ceded.
And we stand in solidarity with them.
Tranzmission on 4ZZZ, amplifying the trans and gender diverse community of Meanjin, Brisbane and beyond. Hello, good morning Meanjin. You're listening to Tranzmission on 4ZZZ. My name is Ez, I use he, him pronouns.
And my name's Hazel and I use she, her pronouns.
And in today's episode of Tranzmission, we are exploring dating, romance, flirting, and intimacy in trans and gender diverse lives. Spicy. Relationships can be complex for anyone, but for trans and gender diverse people, those experiences are often shaped by additional considerations, including identity, disclosure, safety, and the ways others understand or even misunderstand us. So throughout the show, we'll be chatting, Hazel and I, about the realities of dating, building confidence and connection, as well as navigating intimacy on our own terms. We'll also touch on topics such as communication, boundaries, and the importance of moving beyond assumptions, including rethinking what intimacy can look like and challenging harmful dynamics such as fetishization. We'll also be sharing some practical insights for people who are dating trans individuals, as well as resources for listeners who would like to explore these ideas further. So, it's gonna be funky.
Oh my.
Getting ready.
I love that. Really setting the scene. I'm excited. I think it's going to be, well, it's going to be educational.
It will be
informative.
But before we get too saucy, we should get right into some news and community events, which is completely relevant and a slight tone shift. So, as usual for Tranzmission, just disclosure, some trigger warnings. News around trans and gender diverse people can always be triggering. So please make sure to look after yourself and tune out for the next few minutes if you need. Would you like to read the first one, Hazy?
I would love to. LGBTQ plus Australians warned of, quote, serious risks when travelling to the United States. Equality Australia has issued a travel alert warning that LGBTQ plus Australians, particularly transgender and gender diverse people, may suffer significant risks when travelling to the United States. The advisory highlights concerns including potential visa complications, denial of entry, and possible detention at the border. It points to recent policy changes and reports of travellers being questioned or refused entry due to discrepancies in identity documents, particularly where gender markers differ across official records. Equality Australia is urging travellers to carefully consider the circumstances before planning a trip, noting that those with a history of LGBTQ+ advocacy or political activity may face additional scrutiny. Equality Australia recommends seeking legal advice, reviewing documentation closely, and weighing the risks before travel. The warning comes amid growing concern within the community, with some Australians reportedly cancelling trips due to fears about safety and treatment at US borders. For more information, you can head to Equality Australia's website, equalityaustralia.org.au, or follow their social media at Equality Australia, and we'll share a link on the Tranzmission socials at tranz.radio on Instagram.
Sweet. Cool. Make sure you're looking out for yourselves as you travel. Queensland appeal overturns key ruling in drag story time vilification case. This is not the most freshest news, but it has happened in the last month. And Equality Australia has welcomed a Queensland Appeal Tribunal decision finding that a previous ruling dismissing a vilification complaint against Conservative commentator Lyle Shelton was wrongly decided. The case was brought by Brisbane drag performers Johnny Valkyrie and Dwayne Hill following a 2020 Drag Queen Storytime event after Shelton published blog posts describing them as dangerous role models and comparing them to convicted sex offenders like Jeffrey Epstein and Andrew,
Tate?
No.
Oh, there's more?
The Prince.
Oh, Prince, yeah.
Yeah, that guy. Former. The tribunal found the earlier 2023 decision was affected by a significant legal and factual errors, including incorrect assumptions about queer identities and the nature of drag. The appeal tribunal also rejected the idea that homophobia and transphobia are no longer relevant issues, affirming that drag is a central part of queer culture. Advocacy groups say the decision is an important step in ensuring vilification laws are properly applied, though the case is not yet finalised. President of the LGBTI Legal Service, Ren Shaikh, has said, unfortunately, the matter is not yet over, with the parties due to make submissions over the coming months so that a new decision can be made. However, this is still a significant win for our community. We thank our clients for their bravery and tenacity over the past 6 years, and they continue to fight to ensure that LGBTQ+ people are protected from unlawful vilification.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
I like that that's heading in the right direction. And I also want to point out it's kind of funny that if they want to compare drag performers to sexual assaultists and pedophiles, they have to list a bunch of straight cis white men as your comparison points.
Also, in terms of the Epstein files, you know how many drag performers show up in there? Not one.
Goose egg. All right. And we have the demand for trans adult content rises as trans rights decline. New report finds. A new feature from Playboy highlights a growing contradiction between the rising demand for transgender adult content and increasing attacks on trans rights. The article reports that trans performers are seeing significant growth in viewership and visibility online, with trans categories becoming some of the fastest growing in the adult industry. However, the surge in popularity exists alongside a broader political climate where trans communities are facing increasing discrimination, legal restrictions, social stigma, particularly in countries like the United States. The piece centers the voices of trans adult creators who describe a complex and often uncomfortable dynamic between desire and discrimination. While their work is widely consumed, many say they continue to experience marginalization, harassment, and limited protections both online and offline. Advocates argue that the trend reflects a deeper cultural contradiction, where trans bodies are fetishized in the media, but trans people themselves are denied rights, safety, and recognition in everyday life.
Yes, and that probably nicely ties in with what we'll be chatting a little bit about throughout the episode today.
Pretty relevant, yeah.
Yeah, super relevant. And, so we're going to be talking about, trans sex, dating, romance, flirting, all the things. And we will link back into some of what that means for us as a wider community as well as we chat. Also, we've got some community events as well coming up. So, Trans Day of Visibility, Trans-travaganza.
Well done.
Woo! World's largest trans flag, Tuesday, 31st of March from 3 p.m. at Davies Park in West End. This is a completely free event, so come on along.
Whoop, whoop.
This Trans Day of Visibility, Trans Justice Mansion, alongside community, will unveil the world's largest trans flag.
What?
And then you can stick around after that, if you've got enough shade under the flag, for a free concert with Clover Love opening for Worm Girls. So get on down to that. Two absolutely incredible local trans bands.
I'm a fan of both those bands.
Me too. I'll be there. So get down for Trans Day Visibility, 31st of March.
Totally. There's another event, which is Pink Noise Easter, which is going to be at the Cave-In, 47 Balaclava Street, Wollongabba. And that's going to be on Thursday, April 2nd from 6 p.m. Another free event. Woo! Pink Noise Easter is your invitation to kick off the Easter long weekend in style. Celebrate the diverse voices of our local queer community, eat some amazing pizza, and a few drinks, and relax. We've got your night covered. Presented in partnership with LGBTIQ plus friendly owned and run venue The Cave-In, and proudly sponsored by the Revive Live Fund, Pink Noise Easter is free entry. Pink Noise Easter will feature sets from Margaret, plus Sixth of the Sun, and Emmy Hour Music, performing solo. The Cave-In is a wheelchair and disabled friendly venue with access to a handy-capable toilet on the ground floor.
Yo! I'm so keen for that as well. And also, we were going to do a little plug for Mardi Grasberg Drag Bingo, which is coming up on the 28th of March. If you've got yourself some tickets, think yourself lucky.
Yeah, no, just sold out as of yesterday.
Yeah.
So, very sorry. We tried to be quick with that, guys, but you'll have to stay tuned for future drag bingos and regional queer events from Mardi Grasberg.
Yeah, linger around out the front of Brisbane Valley Tavern at 6 p.m. on the 28th of March, and maybe someone will give up a ticket.
Yeah, some generous people might help you.
Yeah, that's right. But now... Yeah.
Feels good.
Transition.
What a delicious episode we have.
It's so delicious. You're listening to Transmission on 4ZZZ. My name is Ez, he, him.
My name's Hazel. She, her.
She, her. He, her.
Yeah. She, her.
That's...
We're getting pumped up.
Yeah, we should tell Salty from the Rhinestone Cowgirl about that.
Yeah.
We're chatting. Well, I mean, it's pretty much just crushes chaos and trans romance on Tranzmission today.
Yep.
We'll be talking about dating and intimacy and all those sorts of fun things that trans people get up to when we're not having a crap time. And yeah, we're going to be chatting a little bit about some of our personal experiences, but also just generally
What's going on?
Yeah, what's happening? So, what's dating like, Hazel? What's dating like for you? Trans femme life?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, right?
Yeah.
I'd say, in general, like, to do a broad strokes and to do the sort of, like, mushy, happy kind of side of things first. Like, being able to date as a trans person, to be secure enough in who I am now, after my years of understanding myself as a trans person, trans dating has become such a liberating and fun experience for me. It's been so affirming, and to me, it's sort of like after I spent so much time pushing back against negativity and finding myself amidst everything, this kind of feels to me like fruits of my labor. Like I get to enjoy being myself with other people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because you're like, oh, my body is mine.
Yeah.
And, I know what I do and I don't like. And so, that takes, some exploring and nervousness and all sorts of things.
And being able to say, I know what my body is and I know who I am and what I identify as, and I'm ready to let that be something other people can make meaningful comments on and actions towards and so on. To present yourself in a vulnerable way to other people, which is definitely scary. And obviously, as we'll go into as well, it can put you in trouble as well. But in general, for me, I'd say, first and foremost, it's been very liberating, very, very fun, I'd say. It's probably one of the more fun elements of the trans identity for me at the moment.
Yeah, and I feel like dating while trans and whether you're T for T, which, for those who don't know, means trans for trans. Usually people who identify as T for T are trans people who prefer to date trans people. So we're going to talk, there'll be mentions of preferences and lots of different kinds of preferences that we're talking about here. Everyone has preferences. Just, every kind of person will be like, I prefer more feminine people over more masculine people, or I prefer ambiguity or, whatever.
Yeah,
everyone has preferences and they're completely valid. We're not here to yuck anyone's yum. We're not here to discuss what is or isn't okay for you. We're not here to tell you that.
Exactly. And first of all, I'll say, if you do have a thought in your head, first of all, feel free to text it to us. We're very keen to hear from you guys today as well. This is a very community-focused type of thing, but also...
Yeah, 0420 626 733 is that number for you.
Thank you, Ez. That's very professional. I should have hit that. But additionally, we've got 2 hours of this chat. I promise you, if there's something buzzing around in your head about this world of trans dating, whether that means you're a trans person yourself or an ally looking in, we're going to talk about it. It's going to come up.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and if you are a cis person who is trans attracted or trans romantic, I've heard lots of different terms around people who have attractions towards trans people, not exclusively in a way that you might think might come across as a bit creepy, but more just like naturally happens.
Yes.
Natural preferences. That's what I'm talking about here. These are not unusual things.
Yeah.
Trans people are sexy. I can say that. So, it's okay.
Yeah. I hope. I've spent years, I've spent money, all that, and I can't be sexy afterwards.
I've tried so hard. Yeah, exactly. So, I guess I feel like cis people probably have this issue where they're navigating the like, oh, I find trans people sexy. Oh, am I creepy? Like,
right. That fear
kind
of
thinking.
They'll say the word, the fear of the label of a chaser, right?
Yes.
You don't want to be a chaser, and that's true. You don't want to be a chaser, and there's that line that you're sort of coming up to there, as where there's an idea of what a preference is. There's an idea of what you might be interested in or just innately pulled towards as a person. But that is very different to use another loaded word, fetishization. That's very different to having this sort of approach to people that is harmful to them, that is damaging to your you're socializing with these people.
Yeah, reducing a person down to the sum of their parts is not the best way to approach dating or flirting or interacting with people that, or just trying to find someone to hook up with, hang out with, or date, or marry, or whatever it is your goals are.
Yeah, I think, because one of the, like, to get into it quickly, one of the big things I think is important when we're talking about the idea of avoiding being fetishistic towards trans people is that you want to get heavily involved with knowing who the person is first, and heavily involved with the person and see that. But that doesn't necessarily mean we're talking exclusively in this realm of romance or long-term relationships or involvement. It's true for hookups as well. There's this idea that you want to be putting that person first before you be, diving deep into the physical intimacies of them.
Yeah, and you can also, I think it's also important to listen to that person about their needs and what they're interested in, but also knowing what you like and being able to share what you like with that person, so that way they can also reciprocate.
Totally.
And that doesn't matter whether you're cis, trans, this is something that is kind of like a general rule of like equality in the bedroom.
100%.
Yeah. Okay, I have a question here. How do you navigate conversations around genital preferences in dating spaces? So we're straight into the preferences. Firstly, what is a genital preference? So for those of you, I mean, it's kind of very self-explanatory, but for those of you who don't know, genital preferences are essentially saying, I prefer, I don't know, a penis over a vagina. Very, and I don't want to sleep with anyone who has anything other than that preference that I'm after. Thoughts? Do you have thoughts on this, Hazel?
I like that. Nice deep end way to ask the question. Well, I think it would be wrong to paint a broad stroke over this. And I think it's worth quickly acknowledging as well that in the realm of preferences, even if you feel very strongly one way or another, we're all very flexible people. And especially in the world of trans people, there's a very flexible spectrum when it comes to how genitals are. But I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a preference. It's more to do with your conduct and more to do with the way that you're approaching the people you're interested in reference to your preference. It's absolutely true that some people have preferences. I know some people who have preferences, and that influences their dating, but it doesn't have to come at the cost of the individuals that you're seeking out to date. It's something that is...
Or to shame other people for maybe not having the things that people have preferences for as well.
Absolutely. It may mean that you're incompatible with someone, for sure, but I don't think that necessarily means it comes at a failing of you or that person as well. That's just sort of a reality of you two. And genital preferences are not unique to trans spaces. Genital preferences are also relating to... So I used an example with Hazel the other day where I said, some women prefer big dicks over small dicks. And that would be a genital preference, in my opinion. Amen.
Yeah. And because of that, you might find that there are some men out there who feel like they are inadequate and ashamed and so on and so forth as a result of these genital preferences.
Yeah.
In trans communities, we have a similar thing where we might be like, some trans people prefer people to have had certain kinds of surgeries, or they're attracted to people with certain kinds of surgeries, and those things can also be financial barriers and things that people may not actually be able to have, or maybe from a health perspective might not be able to have. So when we're talking about genital preferences, it's quite... you've got to be careful about how you're speaking to people without trying to shame them. And also, I think one of the big things as well is that sometimes people have preferences because they feel inexperienced with things outside of maybe what they have experience with.
That's very true. I've definitely seen in other people this sort of idea that a trans person might be a safe way for you to explore something that you might have an interest in.
That's pretty common, I think, right?
Yeah, and that's not necessarily untrue depending on your social situation. But again, it comes down to, what are you actually seeking in this person? Are you seeking them as a person? Do you see them as more than the sum of their parts, or are you particularly just interested in their parts?
And maybe that's fine on Grindr if you've arranged that before you caught up, You're like, okay, you're both signing up for whatever.
Yeah, this is where you're saying again, it's the importance of the individual here. Different people are comfortable with different things, and there are comfortable, well-paced ways for you to discover that about each other, what you're comfortable talking about. And for a lot of trans people, like you said, there are barriers to certain surgeries, there are barriers to certain treatments, or potentially there aren't barriers aside from their personal desires with their own transition as well.
Absolutely.
And it's important that we don't view these as checkpoints, as goals, or as necessities of a partner. And if you're coming in with sort of an assumption about what's going to be the situation there, you're probably going to end up disappointing yourself. You have to limit what you're going to predict from a partner if you're trying to interact with a trans person.
Yeah, and communication is really the key here, We want to be respectful of each other. Everybody's body is different, regardless of gender, regardless of cis or transness, regardless of surgeries, no surgeries. Everybody is different, and everybody requires a conversation and an open-minded, considerate, kind conversation.
Absolutely. And that is very true. In my personal experience, there was something that I found fascinating was that I had an interaction with another trans girl who had been on hormones just as long as I, but our situations downstairs, day and night, completely different from each other. And there's, aside from the fact that we had communicated and knew this about each other beforehand, very little way that you could understand that just from assumptions or thinking what's going on, because on the surface we're basically identical setups, but it doesn't carry out in a sexual context,
because everyone has different chemistry and different DNA and all this sort of stuff. Everyone is different, and I guess this sort of kind of comes back to look at the person as a person before anything else. All the bells and whistles and all that sort of stuff is extra on top, but it's not always necessarily it's not the be all and end all.
Yeah, the idea that you'd be seeking someone for a genital preference first before you get to the actual person themselves, I think is where you're going to be stumbling into the biggest confrontations with people. If you're trying to interact with trans people, whether you're cis or trans yourself, if you are clearly prioritizing a physical trait about them before you're interested in who they are as a person, I feel more often than not, you're going to be challenging the idea of who they are. You're going to be challenging the worth of them as a person. And that's where a lot of that friction comes from. Yeah,
and my spidey sense tingles when that happens, and I'm like, I'm sensing a red flag.
Yeah, absolutely.
We know. Trust me, we know.
We absolutely can detect it.
Yes, we can. We've got all those powers. I'll ask another question. Kind of related, since with genital preferences kind of moves into fetishization of trans bodies. And I don't know, what have you experienced or witnessed when it comes to this kind of thing?
In my personal experience as a trans femme person, something that I feel comes a lot is just sort of assumptions about what I'll be interested in doing.
That's a good point. That's the same for trans guys. I have the same experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in the world of trans femmes, particularly when it comes to, and this is just for the sake of example, when it comes to cisgender men who are interacting through apps or just online, one of the key things seems to be that they're particularly interested in the idea of trans femmes topping. That's a very, very common...
Yeah, a stereotype.
Yeah. It's a common desire. And like you said, a stereotype, it's kind of like an expectation they quietly feel like is going to be doable.
No. He's going to ask me this question.
Yeah. And again, you can kind of see it coming a mile away. It's really clear in the vibes a lot of the time. But many trans women are just either not able to or completely not desiring to. It's probably about as far from a consistency as you could possibly get with trans femmes. It's very different for all of them. And so I think for me, the fetishization of a trans femme body, that's what's come up the most, is sort of being seen sort of as a tool for a fantasy. Yeah. More so than as someone who might have their own desires.
Treated as an object? Oh, wow. Never heard of that before.
Yeah. Wait, is that gender affirming now?
Oh, no. Possibly. I don't know. That's your perspective of that.
No, not really. I'm making a joke, folks.
Yeah.
What about for you, Ez?
Well, trans guys, I mean, I don't know. I've heard stereotypes that trans guys are almost always wanting to be bottoms and to receive penetration in particular.
So interesting how it's the complete opposite there, right?
Yeah. It's almost like it's genital based.
Right.
And then I've also heard other things as well, like in queer, lesbian, sapphic women's spaces. There's a lot of trans men in those spaces, and I find trans men in the lesbian or dyke butch scenes to be more top energy. But, I haven't gone around and taken a survey, so not too sure.
Yeah, true.
However, there are stereotypes for trans men as well, which is a lot to do with them wanting, like, the perception that they want to be penetrated, which is just not true. And also there are, depending on the trans guy, there may actually be medical reasons why they can or can't, depending on whether they've had hysterectomy and any other kind of maybe bottom surgery options as well.
Totally.
You might find that there are different things. And this kind of comes back to what you were saying earlier, Hazel, about like, you got to have a conversation with someone about what they like.
For sure.
And I would think that at the end of the day, if you're interested in someone, trans or not, you care about them having a good time.
Right. And that's that thing of, we can tell if you're seeing us more as a tool that you can access a fantasy through.
Yes, definitely.
It is obvious. And, maybe you are in a situation where that's something you like, that's something the other person likes. That's not something that doesn't happen. It's more so that there are people who will just sort of come in expecting that, wanting explicitly that, and basically nothing else. The conversating and the meeting up and everything else is just sort of a means to an end to get to that fantasy.
Yeah. And you know what? If we've been dating a while, if we're having a good time, maybe we've hooked up before, and we're feeling good, I'm happy with a little bit of, sexualizing,
Yeah, exactly. Well,
because, then it's different. Then it's like, then you're in, right? Then
right.
You're flirting. Because
that, again, is more about what you both want from each other. It's about knowing what each other desires. That's different.
Yeah.
It's the same as if you were trying to come up to someone with an extremely alternative taboo fetish. You don't open with that. That's not something you establish. I mean, depending on where you are. I imagine maybe if you're on FetLife, it's a bit different. But we're talking in the general realm of dating. These are things that you learn about each other with intimacy and time, and that is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
You can have those desires.
We've just got a text in from Lara. How long should you wait before discussing medical history, surgeries, and preferences with potential partners, in your opinion?
This is a heavy one.
I don't know. I actually like discussing this stuff pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But that's me.
Exactly. I was about to give the exact same caveat. And therefore, I think we should acknowledge that we do not have a great basis of experience to lean on here. But I've been in the exact same boat where all of my interactions so far have come with me basically being immediately forthcoming with what my situation is.
Yeah, I don't want to waste time because I think like if I don't say things quickly, then I'm like, okay, well then I might disappoint them with the reality or whatever their expectations are later.
Right. There's some stress involved with that for you. But that is a very different experience to a lot of other trans people. For example, I know some stealth trans femmes who go about their lives being assumed more or less to be a cisgender woman by everyone around them. It would be very different to enter the dating scene and suddenly throw away that lifestyle. So I think it's true that this is not going to be the same for absolutely everyone. And I think it basically should come at the point where you are comfortable with each other, you have trust in each other, and you want that physical intimacy. But it also does depend, of course, again, on what your history is. What are those surgeries that you've had? Is that something that's going to affect your intimacy with this other person? There are people who have had bottom surgery who then can have relations with other people who have absolutely no idea that they're a trans person.
Yeah,
and
I've heard many stories like that.
It absolutely should not be on that person that they should need to disclose anything at all about their life. It's I think important to know that this is extremely contextual.
Yeah.
But if we're going to simplify the question of how long should you wait before discussing it, I think you should basically wait until it's right for it to come up. You shouldn't push for this information from someone. You shouldn't try and fight it out of them if they don't want to tell you about it. And vice versa, you shouldn't offer it to someone if it's something important to you unless you're absolutely sure it's something you want to share with them. And if that means that physical intimacy is delayed by that, I think that's probably a necessary thing for your own health and safety.
I also think that if you're going to ask about medical history and things like that, and maybe if you're a non-trans person, if you're a cis person and you're dating someone who's trans and you want to ask these questions, and a safe way to do that might also be like, hey, I'd like to talk about these things with you. We don't have to talk about them right now, but I just want to flag that this is something that I'd like to discuss because I want to respect your body and I want to continue dating you. And what does that look like? Just anyway.
Yeah.
As you were.
I think one of the things that has served me the best personally is just being incredibly direct about what you need and why you need it. And that can be done softly. That doesn't have to be a harsh conversation. Exactly like you said there, as is like, I would like to know this information at some point. You do not have to share it with me, but I have an interest in this, and it's because I want to be closer with you and to have these kinds of experiences with you.
Explain and think for yourself, why do I want to know this? Why is it important to me that I know this about this trans person that I'm seeing? And then articulate that. Tell that person, like, well, I want to know because I'm really into you and I want to make sure that I'm respecting your body and that I'm not injuring you or whatever your situation is, Yeah,
absolutely.
Because it can be all super sexy if you let it.
These are the sounds of direct communication.
It's called a saxophone. You're listening to Transmission on 4ZZZ. I am Ez, he, him.
I'm Hazel, she, her.
And we've been talking trans dating, sex, romance, flirting, all these fun things. Very sultry. Sultry Monday.
Yeah. Everyone knows Monday is the sexiest day of the week.
Absolutely. Start your week right, people.
Yeah, Wednesday calling itself Hump Day with that stolen valor.
Yeah.
Fundamentally unsexy day.
Yeah, it is. Just the word hump actually is not really my vibe.
It isn't, is it? It makes me think of like a small misbehaving dog. It's not a good time.
I don't know, there must be some trans masks out there upset about that comment.
I was going to say, like, knowing this audience, I shouldn't have assumed everyone would find that not hot.
I think hump day and I think of a camel.
Oh, okay. See,
I don't know how that happened. Maybe primary school, I think. Like, the middle of the week, the middle of the camel has a hump. And then that's the association
I love that. I like that. Fortunately, after all of that, you were able to give the world a very normal thought after the nonsense that I just spat out. So thank you for that, Ez.
You're welcome. Anyway, speaking of humps, dating trans people 101. That's what I was going to say.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah. I guess this section of Transmission today, I want to chat a little bit about tips, tricks. Maybe you have some tips and tricks, listener, for as a trans person, or maybe you're a cis person who'd be like, "Oh, I found this was an effective way to flirt."
That's good to know.
Yeah, let us know. If you're a trans person dating or want to date someone who is trans, or maybe you're interested, here's we'll give you a couple of little hot tips. If it's a trans mask, generally, if they haven't had top surgery and it is something that you are unsure of whether they're uncomfortable about, avoid that area entirely.
Yeah.
And don't mention it.
Makes total sense.
Yeah, let that person bring it up on their own. However, if you are wanting to flirt with a trans man and maybe they have had top surgery, especially if they've had top surgery, they're likely to be quite happy with their very expensive new look. Maybe even just a gentle touch on the chest as you say something.
Right.
That's very effective.
That's nice to know.
Very, very gender affirming.
Yeah, it's that mix of gender affirming and also directly recognizing specific efforts that they've made for themselves there.
Yes.
That's really nice.
Hot tip.
Yeah.
It's effective on me, just letting you know. Yeah.
That's for you listeners. Feel free to text in if you are currently touching Ez's chest.
I'll text myself.
Yeah. On that similar vein, when it comes to trans femmes, and I feel like this is especially worth addressing considering the world of fetishization around trans femmes gets really hooked on the genitals.
Hooked on the genitals. Yeah,
my apologies.
That's a tagline.
Yeah. There's a very large amount of trans women who have not had bottom surgery because it is an incredibly expensive procedure, who really do not like their genitals. So unless she's very forthcoming with being proud of or not minding or anything like that, you should really take your time before you address that or pay any heed towards it. You know what I mean? It's incredibly dicey territory for a lot of trans women. So really don't go in assuming that that's going to be something that she's rocking proud and high energy with. You know?
Yeah, and also terminology. So when we're referring to parts of our bodies and each other's, making sure you know the language to use. This does require conversation. And you'll need to be brave.
Yes, you'll need to just sort of ask direct.
Yeah. And
what do you want me to call it?
ignorance, we can tell the difference between ignorance and just outwardly dickishness.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're asking a question in ignorance, you'll probably come across as quite sweet and open and vulnerable, and we'd like that.
Yeah, that's nice. And
Yeah.
in fact, in a world like the world we're in right now, sweet, vulnerable, emotionally sensitive questions are real nice. That I'd argue is maybe one of the better feelings out of all the feelings.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say when it comes to terminology for at least transfemme genitalia, in my experience, a lot of words I really don't like. There's a bunch of nasty terms.
Yeah, there's a few out there as well.
And
for trans men.
that's for me. Like I know that there's other trans women out there who are perfectly happy with some of the terms that I find really unappealing. So that is, yeah, absolutely talk about that.
You may also find, so some, I'll speak from a trans masc experience, and just a little caveat as well. Hazel and I are talking about our experiences and what we know. We do not speak on behalf of all trans people. We are not monolithic.
For sure.
So yeah, these are our experiences. But I do find that trans men generally quite in flux when it comes to what terms they like to use when it comes to referring to like their genitals. It can be typically cis male centric language, so like
Right.
cock, for example, dick, so on. But they may also prefer variations of that, like T-boy dick, T-dick.
Yeah.
You know, there's
totally.
and then there's other things too, where like we just heard a song before. Sorry, podcast listener, if you missed it, but Ezra Mitchell has a song called Pussy Boy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there may be some creative language that we like to come up with, and terms that we like to come up with.
For sure.
So always good to ask. And then sometimes I know trans men who are like, I'm totally fine with you saying vulva or a vagina. Like, that's fine. So you really have no idea until you ask these questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone's different.
And I think, you know, when we were talking about general advice in the first place, something that very much works for me as a trans femme, and I imagine for a number of other trans femmes, based on the friends I have and their experiences as well, is being very willing to be very forward with how feminine you treat us. Like, it's kind of like what you were saying before, as a gentle hand on the chest is such a masculine sort of a way to show affection to a masculine person. Same absolutely works in reverse. If you wish to be, you know, outwardly respecting the femininity of the trans woman in front of you, or the trans femme in front of you, that's something that's like does wonders. You know, particularly like in environments with guys, if they're going to be doing the classic gentlemanly things. Huge. That's amazing. If you're interacting with women as a trans woman, and they interact with you incredibly sapphic,ly with how they're after those interactions, not wanting something rough from you, but expecting a much more lesbian experience from you, that is huge. That feels really special and really empowering. That kind of stuff goes a long way. Yeah,
and similarly in reverse, I know a lot of trans guys who quite like, particularly trans guys who identify as gay, and spend time in the cis gay or gay scene. You know, communication is not quite as sharp as in the sapphic scene. However, there are still loads of cues and ways that queer men communicate and interact with each other, and treating trans guys with the same kind of interaction is also going to go very far.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
yeah.
I also would like to, coming back a little bit to like what we were talking about with terms for genitals and everything like that. We also were talking before about avoiding fetishization. It's worth acknowledging that for both trans femmes and trans mascs, in the world of sexuality and pornography and so on and so forth, there are a number of kinks that share visual similarities or social similarities with transitioning that are not the same as transitioning. And conflating the two can go a long way to hurting the person you're talking to.
Yes.
For example, in the world of trans femmes, if someone is explicitly a trans femme, they see themselves as a trans woman, don't call them a femboy. That's not going to go very well.
Yeah,
Don't call them a sissy or a cross-dresser. These kinds of terms I have absolutely seen thrown around. And those are terms that other people do identify with. You have to be very specific when you use that language, and you can absolutely cause a big sting and very much invalidate the person you're talking to.
Yeah, and yeah, just be mindful not to reduce people down to stereotypes or boxes. You know, there's also the stereotype or the assumption that a lot of trans guys like to be referred to as good boy, or a good boy. I think there is some kind of affirmation, like gender euphoria relating there, which is good. But also, just check before you start saying good boy to someone.
Because there's an implied dynamic going on there.
Yes,
Not everyone is going to want that dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you want to be careful about how you say those things. And yeah, terminology is unique. If you're confused, actually, I think there's a really good website somewhere on terms. I'll get back to you on that one.
Yeah.
But there are some really good websites on like narrowing down like what kind of terms are used in community and what they actually mean.
Yeah,
So
totally.
read up a little bit if you're unsure.
Yeah, doing some research, again, is also just a great way to demonstrate that you do care, that you're emotionally invested.
That's it.
If you come forward presenting that you know a bit of this stuff because you've looked it up, because you want to be emotionally sensitive, that can be meaningful, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, I think there's also the fact that, like, again, not a monolith. I feel like we say it every episode, the trans community is not a monolith. There are plenty of people who will like absolutely everything that Ez and I have mentioned, not personally liking ourselves. And it's perfectly fine in a sexual context in the world of kinks and taboos to be interested in things that you wouldn't socially be interested in as an individual. It's important to just know where those lines are and to not blur them. And this is what we're saying when people fetishize us, it's like they're blurring those lines for us. They don't see that there's a distinction between what we might be interested in a sexual context and who we are socially as individuals.
Yeah. And for me personally, it makes me feel like, okay, well, I'm just a flavor of the night and not a person that is for every day. You know, you're treating me like a dessert that you don't tell everyone about because you want that secret experience. And that's a really big thing. I know, like, for a lot of trans women, a lot of trans people who don't pass or are not clocked as cis immediately have troubles like dating in terms of actually being seen together at a dinner. And I think that's really sad. So one way to show a trans person that you really care about them a lot more than the sum of their parts is to take them out in public to dinner and treat them with respect and with adoration and listen to them. Particularly trans women. Take them out on a date, damn it. Let them see the sun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And also, I think, I don't know, when I first started Transition as well, I was quite nervous about entering the dating space because I thought, a lot of my internalized transphobia, a lot of what I thought about trans people at the time was that, we were freaks or, we were unusual and all this sort of stuff. And so that kind of leads into it. So sometimes there may actually be a little bit of, reassurance, more reassurance that you have to provide someone that you're attracted to them in some ways to help them feel more comfortable and settle into their transition or their body or the changes they're going through. Yeah.
And, again, that willingness to be involved on that deeper level, that willingness to see that, if you want to be involved in any way, but particularly in this realm of, like, if you want to be romantically involved with a transgender person, there's more investment that you need to do than you might have expected. You might have to be more considerate of mental health. You have to be more considerate of, like you're saying, as just intrinsic fears about being in public that wouldn't have crossed your mind if you're not a trans person yourself. Being willing to put in that extra legwork is something that is incredibly meaningful to us as trans people. My beautiful partner, Lara, who I've been seeing for a long time, has known me since before my transition. And so to be with them from before to after my transition and them adapting to and understanding all those changes and them being prepared to support me when I am too anxious to be out in public and everything like that. That is so meaningful. And I feel incredibly lucky to have that kind of care. And as a result, I feel like we have an incredibly deep and close romantic bond. And that's, I think, something that's a bit unique to a trans relationship. Yeah.
And actually, I was going to talk a little bit something more about that, but I will leave it until we come back.
Feels good. Loving you always, baby.
Oh, yeah.
Transmission. Woo.
Wow.
Love this job.
Yeah.
Wait, you're listening to Tranzmission. My name is Ez, he, him.
My name's Hazel, she, her.
And we're talking intimacy, sex, bodies, dating, chaos, crushes, all these things in the trans community.
Yeah.
I'm talking from a trans masc experience.
I'm talking from a trans femme experience.
And we're lacking a bit of a non-binary experience.
Yeah, we're both pretty
here.
binary with our experiences.
Yeah. So I apologize. The lack of diversity in this conversation.
This is accountability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But want to just like have a little like, tip my cap to you non-binary people who because we talked about terminology just before.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just touch on that terminology for non-binary people who probably don't want to be called good boy or a good girl. Good person may not be the best alternative there. But again, want you to have conversations with your partner, your
For
sexual
sure.
partners, and discuss language.
A lot of these same rules apply. It's
Yeah.
we spoke about what works for a trans masc in a binary sense and what works for trans femme in a binary sense, but really what's working for both of our experiences there is that someone is meeting us at where we are.
Yep.
They're identifying what we want, what we need affirmed, based firstly just on communicating and outlining exactly what you want / asking what the other person wants, but also in addition just being familiar and doing your research and finding out and listening to shows like Tranzmission, for example.
Yeah, just saying. But also, you may also find that you get more confident in this area the more you date. You may make some stumbles, you may fall, you may embarrass yourself, and that's okay because you pick yourself up, you dust yourself off.
Amen.
And we keep pursuing the art of love. And it's we're going to chat a bit more about something that I mentioned with Hazel and I when we were planning this episode. Was talking about like how sometimes there's this expectation with sex, and I felt this before I transitioned, before I knew this about being trans, but there's this expectation that penetration is some kind of goal
Right.
in a sexual encounter, and it doesn't have to be.
No. It's very heteronormative.
Yeah.
Right? The idea that
Don't be straight. Don't do penetration.
yeah, well, that the end
Yeah.
of sex, like the most sex that you can have.
The most sex, the ultimate 100% equal sex.
Yeah, the completionist of sex is to do penetration, but
I completed it.
yeah. Well, I mean,
5 stars.
the whole talk about like first, second, third base, like a lot of the language
scripts,
around
yeah.
it. Yeah, a lot of the language around it in a heterosexual context is that that's the end goal. That's as far as you go. But obviously in a queer context, that's completely different.
And queers have been reinventing what sex is from the dawn of time. Like, I mean,
not even reinventing, but just discovering different ways that it is,
yeah.
Like, this is just kind of how it's always functioned for different people for a very long time.
Queer iterations of sex.
Yeah.
Just the variations and...
Yeah, and as someone who has gone from being a guy in the past and being sexual and seeing myself as a dude, and then moving into an environment where I'm not seeing myself that way and I'm not seeing myself as the penetrator, if that makes sense.
Yeah. The two genders. The penetrator and penetrated.
When you come at it from that new perspective, like there's ideas that like, will it be a different experience? And it is. It's not a worse experience. And some of the most gratifying and satisfying and like holistic sexual experiences I've ever had are completely divorced from the idea of penetration. It's absolutely not necessary for a complete experience.
Yeah, and it's also, as you age, because this happens to all of us, I hope it happens to all of us as we age, or that we age, is that, when you're building intimacy with a partner and you're building on what sex really means to both of you in your intimate relationships, and if you have multiple partners as well, you have unique intimate relationships with each and every one of them. They're all different.
Right.
And you can say that about exes, you can say that about current partners. Like, there's no way you can compare these things really, because they're different people, and different people bring out different expressions of yourself, bring out different parts of yourself.
Totally.
And so what you want to do is when you're having those conversations, and you're establishing how you feel with each other, and then you start getting into a groove, and then you end up figuring out, oh, there's this thing that this partner of mine really, really likes, and you just know the buttons. You know that person.
Right.
It might take a few weeks, it might take a few months to get to know them really intimately, their body in that way and how it works. And then you're in sync and you're relaxed and you feel safe.
Yeah.
And then you have like these magical experiences that don't have scripted goals of like first base, second base, third base, what a home run is, what is this. We're not.
Yeah.
We're just going off of what we also don't have like porn necessarily, right? To like look at and go, oh, so that's how this happens.
Right. There isn't an industry of content establishing a strict set of
Trans
steps.
rules.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what exists is for the cis male gaze. You know, what there is
Absolutely.
in the pornography space is not actually for trans people to consume.
100%.
It's for cis heteronormative male men to explore their sexual fetishization of others and other bodies.
Absolutely.
So we're creating our own journey. We're creating our own ideas on what sex and intimacy are and what feels close. And also, when you are aging, it's good to have had, you know, these experiences, because penetration might not be on the table as you age.
Yeah, I mean, the reality of, to get into that cross-sectionality of disability as well, because a large chunk of the trans population are also disabled, a higher proportion than typical outside of the trans community. Everyone becomes disabled when you age. That's part of life. And knowing how to be intimate with each other, knowing how to find for yourself and for other people that kind of enjoyment without needing to rely on social scripts that were written for you in the 1950s is huge. And again, I started this episode by saying that for me, dating as a trans person has been one of the most affirming and liberating parts of the whole experience for me. Part of it is this. Part of it is knowing that I'm getting this completely gratifying and satisfying experience that is also completely individual to me and completely new in that way.
Yeah.
I'm not retreading old ground that other people have insisted is the ground I should be treading on, you know?
You're doing trans sex wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, like, we're not, I hope that trans people aren't there policing each other on this, because it's ridiculous. But, you know, being able to build intimacy in that way, like you're saying, Hazel, you know, being able to, like, explore with each other, and as you age, as you find yourself in various stages of disability or capability as well, you may be capable of some things at certain points in your life and not others. You know, what this is you're actually building longevity of intimacy. You're making sure that your intimacy is actually about your connection with a person in a physical way that may transcend your bodies sometimes, and that's beautiful. And that's when you move into the places of love.
Yeah, and absolutely. And, you know, to lean a bit back on what I said before, you know, long-term relationship pre and post my personal medical transition, that's exactly what you're talking about. The way in which we were intimate with each other shifted and it changed. And that is super valuable. And also, you know, because of that willingness to change and to find new ways to do it, also has led to some of the most gratifying experiences I've had and probably wouldn't have had if I wasn't willing to explore myself in that way.
Yeah, and being able to feel strong enough to, or willing enough, brave enough to be vulnerable, to try something different is also wonderful.
Yeah.
And also, as your body's changing, as you know, for trans people, as your body is changing, your sensation changes, your sense of touch changes, what feels good changes. Hormones, you know, we're just a sack of chemicals, really. So as those chemicals change, as those hormones change in your body, what you might like completely change, but also it's totally fine for the partner that you're being with to also be like, hey, this isn't actually what I'm really that into anymore. Or what you're seeking is different from what we used to have, and I'm not really into that. And that's okay. It just means that you have a natural incompatibility.
Yeah. Totally.
And those are conversations that we have to be willing to face as well.
Definitely. And it's hard and it's heavy, but it's necessary. Because at the end of the day, especially if you were, you know, if you're facing that change in your relationship, you're in that relationship because you both care about each other. And sometimes enabling the best things for each other does mean that you're not on the same boat anymore. Yeah,
it does.
That can be really tough. But you know, it's not always necessarily the end of a relationship either.
No, it can reform, it can reshape, you can become friends.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you know, you do not have you do not have control over someone else's bodily autonomy. If you're with a partner who needs to make a change that makes them no longer someone you feel like you can be sexually intimate with, that's just a reality. That's going to happen. That's not something you have control over. That's not something that you can help them to avoid doing. It's just a reality that you both have to face.
Yeah, and there's, you know, it's nobody's fault. Like, you know, there's a lot of, I think when things happen like that, sometimes people feel like there's a point to blame or there's something to blame. There's nothing to blame there. It's just change is inevitable. Every relationship goes through transitions, some bigger and more notable than others. But, you know, it's all about communicating and being honest with ourselves. We have to be honest with ourselves too.
For sure.
So yeah, keep that in mind. We are now coming to the end of our time.
We made it.
We did. Yeah. Love, intimacy, sexy, romance, all those things. Was yummy.
Oh my. I have to, compose myself again.
Yeah. It's time for some
Too distracting.
Recommended reading.
Oh,
and
God, recommended readings. Don't say there's poetry in there. Good God.
Time for some research. I've curated for some cis folks and also trans folk some resources. These resources are optional extras. You don't have to do this, obviously. These are recommended.
This is not mandatory homework. We will not be
scored.
checking. Yeah.
You will not be tested on this. But I've got some recommendations here. So one of them. So if you're a cis person who is interested in dating trans people, or is dating a trans person, and you'd like to know some more things about the bedroom, there's a book called Trans Sex by Kelvin Sparks, which is a practical and affirming guide for navigating intimacy with trans partners. It is very basic. It is kind of like a trans 101. So if you are a trans person yourself, you may find this a little bit like no brainer, obviously, about a bunch of these things. But for people who don't know, this is like a really great entry point. So Trans Sex by Kelvin Sparks. Another recommended reading that I have, and this is probably more for activists, anarchists, and people exploring non-traditional relationships. This kind of lends itself more into some of the mental health spaces and like the psychological parts of a relationship, but and this is also written by a trans guy. It's called by Dean Spade. It's called Love in a Fucked Up World: How to Build Relationships, Hook Up, and Raise Hell Together. And it's a powerful look at relationships outside of mainstream norms, grounded in care and justice as like that main. So that's a really fantastic read.
That sounds super interesting.
It's not really a book that I recommend sitting down reading front to back. It's more like go in. You might find a topic in the in the table of contents that you like is relevant, and then
it's a good reference book.
Yeah, really good reference book. Another recommended reading with more of a visual framework, which is the Relationship Anarchy Smorgasbord. Now, if you haven't seen this before, it's a flexible visual framework for designing relationships based on your own values and needs. So essentially, it's like a big circle, and there's a million different circles inside the circle. And it says in the middle, it says, to form your relationships, you and another can pick any number of items from any number of platters on this smorgasbord. Take a huge helping, or just a scoop, the dish the two of you hold in your relationship. So, you've got things domestic, power exchange, and kink. You've got communication, frequency. So, you might be talking to someone daily, weekly, monthly. Is that person? You might have caregiving. So maybe you've got a partner that's kind of provides you with receiving/giving disability care, for example. You might also have a different person in your life that provides you with emotional intimacy or physical intimacy. There's a huge, it's a smorgasbord, right? So a smorgasbord of all these different needs that you might have as an individual. And then what you do is you sit down with a partner or partners, and you actually work out together what kinds of needs you are looking to have with each relationship. And this was also designed by, I believe, a trans guy. I've forgotten his name.
That is really interesting.
No. Originated by Larissa Lawrence and Heather Orr of Vancouver. Polyamory. That's cute. I like that.
That's really cool. I really like that, and I love the idea of that. It's very kind of playful in its nature, but a way to structure and to figure out what you're after. I should also say, obviously, that's in the context heavily of polyamory and relationship anarchy, but whether or not you're doing this, if you're in a monogamous relationship, you are quietly doing all of this stuff already. Or maybe sometimes not doing it when you should be doing it, because a lot of it is pre-scripted for monogamous relationships, and you've sort of been incepted with those ideas before you entered the relationship. So these kinds of texts are valuable for you as well, even if you're not polyamorous yourself, because it teaches you about the fact that every relationship is going to have different needs.
And it's also a really great self-reflective tool. You can look at the Relationship Anarchy Smorgasbord, for example, and just be like, oh, where do I get my emotional support needs in my life? Am I getting that from my best mate over here? Or where do I, one part of this is like public displays of affection. Maybe you have public displays of affection with a friend. You could totally do that.
Right.
You could hold hands or put your arm around each other in public. Is that something that you do with all your friends or just one of your friends? This is about like looking at your own relationships and all your needs, and it can be a very good self-reflective tool, because you can also look at this and go, oh wow, I actually realized that I have a friend that I do 20 of these things with,
Right.
and then my actual close partner, it's just the physical intimacy. So, you learn a little bit about how you have relationships with people too. So it's a good tool in that
really
sense.
Interesting.
Also some recommended readings from the one and only Ray White. the local poet who knows it. This is some recommended readings from Ray. So Ray there's a website called mirabelweather.com. I'll put this link up as well in the podcast notes and also on the show notes on the 4ZZZ website. And it's called Language and Content. Fucking Trans Women, which is the zine about the sex lives of trans women by Mira Bellwether. So if you want to take a look, I recommend checking that out.
Mm-hmm.
And then also another poetry anthology that Ray has recommended is called Effable, a spicy anthology of queer crypt poetry, 14 poems. I'll also chuck that up as well if you're looking for some sexy poetry.
Love it. Very, very interesting, very exciting, and like such a wide variety of ways to come at this from as well. Because at the end of the day, this is all incredibly complex, and we can give all the advice we can, but it's not going to map to your situation exactly, because every trans person is an individual, and frankly, every cis person is their own enigma as well. You know,
That's it.
There's
Yeah.
all of these different ways that we're connecting and figuring out how to connect with each other.
And I love it. I love it so much. And you know what? Don't forget to subscribe to 4ZZZ and support community radio. 4ZZZ.org.au/support. Every dollar matters. Every subscription matters. And come into the fold of the warm inner glow of the Z universe. We love it here. Yeah, we love you. Take care of yourselves. Look out for each other. And we'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Transmission. Catch us every Monday live on 4ZZZ from 10 a.m. or listen to our podcast on the Community Radio Plus app.